Good morning, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to Boquete Now, talk radio on Radio Cherokee 103.3 FM. Sponsored by Big Daddy's Grill, Boulder 54, and the Tap Out Sport Zone. We've got a great show for you today. With me is Will Fierstein and Dan Gallagher from the Boquete Veteran Outreach group here in town, and we're going to have a great conversation. We've got a lot of things to talk about, a lot of things to go over, and some new information to come out that has come out with these guys, and to go over some old information that maybe you've forgotten. Before we get to that, though, I want to give you the latest information I have here from MINSA. This came out in their communication number 157. It's a 157th day that they have released information on this pandemic as we are experiencing it here in Panama. MINSA has achieved an establishment of relations with the communities of faith. This is something that has been a topic of conversation for a while. Yesterday, the rapprochement was achieved with the leaders of the communities of faith in the entire country in order to explore the possibility of actively joining with them in the fight against COVID-19. The president of the Episcopal Pastoral Council, Monsignor Jose Domingo Ulloa, for the Ecumenical Committee of Panama, also Bishop Julio Marti, and the Evangelical Alliance of Panama, headed up by Pastor Leovaldo Zurita. It was explained to them that there are unified traceability teams, and these teams are community groups that are coordinating traceability and follow-up actions for COVID-19 positive patients in the country's communities. Now, at this meeting, Monsignor Ulloa expressed that as religious communities of Panama, they consider this exploratory conversation as profitable, in which the possibility of coordinating and collaborating with MINSA was analyzed. Now, in addition, he added that it was a very hopeful meeting to be a bridge and to approach the families affected by COVID-19. The vaccine progress report also included that the Minister of Mr. Sucre informed that a thematic table has been set up to analyze the different vaccines that are under study in the world. As you know from the news, there are several different nations that are making very, very good headway in the development of vaccines in the UK, in the United States, as well as Russia and China. This group of advisors follows each of the vaccine studies. Now, there's another group that works with the National Secretary for Science and Technology, that's SENASIC, MINSA, and the national government in general, and this group is called the Consortium for Vaccine Research. Now, they are dedicated to analyzing the vaccines under study, and these groups advise and guide MINSA on what would be the best vaccines to use in Panama. And the consortium has met with MINSA and the Foreign Ministry and even the President of the Republic, Laurentino Cortizo, to contribute and evaluate what will be the best vaccine overall. There's also been an agreement reached for oxygen therapy. Yesterday afternoon, the agreement was signed with the members of the United for Panama Foundation to formalize the proposal for home care. Now, it's established for next week to start supporting the actions of MINSA through home health care in order to intervene in the decrease of three fundamental indicators for the control of the pandemic, and those are hospitalizations for COVID-19 positive patients, the admission to the intensive care units, and the obvious mortality. The home care program is a model for COVID-19 positive patients. It's made up of standardized clinical criteria and supported by the telemedicine. It includes daily virtual follow-up through video calls and messaging, as well as phone calls by medical personnel for patients who are positive for COVID-19. It's a pilot project. It's going to last for 3 months and will be first implemented in the Juan Diaz district. A doctor, nurse, and first aid oxygenation therapist will administer supplemental oxygen under prescription and medical follow-up, seeking to keep the patient with oxygen availability in their lungs in order to decrease inflammation and acceleration of the disease, and also to release much needed beds in the national hospitals. The minister finally reiterated that a call to the population to comply with hygiene measures. Everything that enters your house must be cleaned with 2 tablespoons of Clorox per gallon of water, just as they are fruits. They must be washed. The epidemiological report in the world, as of last night, there were near 10 million people recovered. That's a good number, right? There's a total of 17,061,000 plus that have so far been infected with COVID-19, and worldwide 667,808 deaths. That is a death rate of 3.9%. Now, for us here in Panama, as of last night, there were 38,218 recovered patients. There are 922 new positive cases, and there's a cumulative total of 64,191. To date, they've done 3,212 tests that were applied. Positive percentage rates, 29%. 23 new deaths have been registered, totaling 1,397 accumulated. The lethality is 2.2%. Now, if you remember, I just told you the worldwide mortality rate is 3.9%. So we are making headway. There's 1,453 people in the hospital. Well, actually, they're hospitalized. 1,292 are in the regular hospitals, and 161 are in the ICU. And that is the COVID news for today. Excuse me. So we have some good news, though, here to tell you. This morning, the final winners were released for the best Panama coffee, the best coffee in Panama. And we've got some here in Boquete that took some much coveted prizes home. In each category, there were 8 lots of winners who obtained the highest scores in the international competition. This is a really big deal. You know, Panama does well every year, and this year was no different. In the category of geishas lavados, with 94 out of 100 points, the Elita Green Tip Geisha Washed Batch from the Lamatis family took second place. In third place, that went to the Bambito Estate Coffee by Itza Priscilla Citon Vega de Amar with a 93.50. First place went to, let's see here, well, let me see here. It seems to be gone. Who won first? Oh my gosh, I'm sorry about that. Oh, well, here you go. Traditional wash coffees, Carmen Grand Reserve de Panama lot, 89.29 points. Yeah, seeming to be missing the first place winner here, and that is unfortunate. I'm sorry about that, but let's move on here. In the category of Geisha Natural and Processed Coffees, second place went to the Helen Russell Willie J. Boots Parnasius Geisha Natural lot with 94.25 points. Third is Cafe Gallardo's Nugo Concept 2020 lot with 94 points. And fourth place went to Tessie Palacios de Hartman's Aphrodite Geisha Natural Batch. In category of Pacamaras, we got, let's see, the Damardi Noble Pacamara lot by David Peck obtained 89.74 points, and the Pacamara El Manatiel de Maria A. Amruso lot with 89.22 points, and Cafe Panama with 89.59 points. In the category of traditional natural processed coffees, second place went to Couture Natural Duncan Catawba Farms by Ricardo Coiner with 89.09 points, and third place batch went to Don Benji Maragogi Natural Lot Bella Vista by Stefan Mueller and Benjamin Dianos with 88.84 points. The category of traditional wash coffees, second place, I'm going to have a list here in a minute of whoever all these first place ones, so just bear with me. Went to the Esmeralda El Velo Bourbon .2 Wash Batch by Peterson family with 89.18 points. And third place went to Don Mariano Lavado Batch of Los Gonzalez Coffee with 88 points. And the fourth place went to Typical Wash Reserve La Patrona de Tessie Palacios de Hartman lot with 88.04 points. Let me scroll back up here and see who, okay, all right. Helen Russell and Willem J. Boots Olympic Geisha Lavado won first place with 95.01 points. How about that, huh? And the Geisha Black Jaguar Natural Limited lot of Tessie Palacios of Los Pezos won with first place with 94.71 points. The first place for Pacamara went to the Jansen family's estate Pacamara lot with 90.47 points. And the category for traditional, natural, and processed coffees, first place went to Mama Cata Moquita Processed Batch by Teodoro Garrido with 90.88 points. And first place for traditional wash coffees went to Carmen Gran Reserva de Panama, Lot Red Carmen Cafe Trading SA, with 89.29 points. This is we're the first program to release these winnings, so we're very, very proud to have done that. And congratulations to all of the winners, first, second, third, and fourth place in the categories for the best coffee in Panama, and especially to our neighbors here in Boquete and in Bocan and Alto Kiel and all the other places. And we got some great coffee here, gentlemen, don't we?
And we're just waiting for it to be served.
I know, right? But we know we have the winning batches, so all we got to do is wait to get them. All right, let's move on here with the show, and thank you for your patience. Again, we have retired First Sergeant Daniel Gallagher, the United States Marine Corps, who is a licensed psychologist and therapist in the States. He's retired now, so he does not operate in a professional capacity here, but he helps a whole heck of a lot of people. And back to the show again, Will Fierstein from the Boquete Veteran Outreach Program.
Very good, you're learning.
Yes, I am. I keep saying veterans, and I keep getting the stink eye. I get the stink eye. So it's veteran. It's veteran. Welcome to the show, gentlemen. You guys doing all right?
Very good. Yeah, pretty much. So, how you doing?
Well, yeah. And before we go on, I really got to say that this community is so utterly, unbelievably fantastic and generous. As some of you might know, I went into surgery a few weeks ago. It's oncologic surgery. That's cancer surgery. I had 2 tumors removed, one from my face, one from my abdomen. And the surgery...
One on your face looks really good. You've improved since I saw you last.
I got a facelift on one side of my face.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
But yeah, surgery went really well. Dr. Molto, Dr. Zapata, I have to thank, and also Dr. Diaz here in town. Very, very wonderful team I had working on me. They took very good care of me. I'm healed up at about 90% now, and I feel great. And while I was recuperating, today is my first official day out of quarantine, because I was in the hospital in David, and I was quarantined for 2 weeks with my wife, and the community came together and brought us food every day. And I got to tell you, kudos, props, Cupid dolls all around. I've probably eaten healthier in the last 2 weeks than I think I have my entire life. Surgery for me was complicated because I have diabetes, I have Parkinson's, I have a few other things. So they really did take very good care of me. I can't recommend Hospital Cherokee, Dr. Molto, Dr. Zapata, Dr. Diaz, I think, and the place that one of the clinics I went in David. Todos Segura, I think, something like that. But they're really good too. Someone asked on Facebook about that. So I want to thank you all. Seriously, you showed up for my family, and you got us through a time that was very difficult and very frightening. And I really appreciate every single one of you for that. Thank you very much.
And I know there are a lot of prayers going up for you to go on, to go under that. How hard it is to be in surgery and major doctor stuff going on in a foreign country, and you're just, you get a lot of the information, but you don't understand a lot of what's being said. So you're going in there blind. So
it is, and I have to also give a shout out to Dr. Shannon Tour, because she's a personal friend of mine, and in fact I'll be on her show tomorrow. We're going to be talking about how it is for a gringo or an expat to go through this process in a foreign country. And that'll be an interesting show. But she provided me a lot of translation and explained a lot of things to me. My wife and I have questions at 9-10 o'clock at night, and we text her, and she comes back with an answer, like that. So she's fantastic, and she's over at the clinic where Dr. Gomez is. So to all of them, and to all my friends and family out here, I sincerely thank you for coming to my rescue.
yeah, we got you.
Speaking of rescue.
Yes.
We read Facebook. We all get on social media. Not so much you, Will, but I know that you get the information secondhand and from a lot of the video. And the longer that we seem to be in this situation, in the quarantine, the uncertainty of how long this is going to last, and not knowing whether we're going to be allowed out, or we're not going to be allowed out,
Or back in if we do go
or
on.
back in, yeah. You know, and I'm not a psychologist. That's not even an area where I would even hazard a guess. But it's been my observation that the subtext in some of these posts show an increasing degree of depression and anxiety. And I know that there's a lot of vets out there that have compounding problems, PTSD and what have you. So we can let's start with Dan.
Yeah, he's the expert.
It's hard to really, understand what someone is saying in between, reading in between the lines. But I know that you've got a really good handle on how situations like this affect you, PTSD, depression, anxiety, and all that, and how that ties into potential suicides and whatnot. So, how would you describe the general feeling of say, let's stick with the vets here that are going through all that's going on here?
I think in a sense it's a feeling of doom, whether it's in the United States or here or in all countries where you have veterans. I think most of us went through a period of time where we were in war-type settings, and we expect our life to be, when that's finished, to be under our control and feel comfortable. We tend to move to places like Boquete or Panama. We tend to, or stay in the United States, but we don't necessarily isolate ourselves. Some veterans do. But what we do is we design a community that makes us feel good about ourselves, whether it's going out to a store or coffee here in Boquete, whether it's just being with your wife, whether it's sitting on your porch, swimming. No matter what you do, you design a cocoon for yourself. So
like a routine.
Like a routine, so you'll feel better. When you have a pandemic, it interrupts that routine. When it interrupts that routine, and it goes on for a long period of time, you tend to start feeling a depressed state. You tend to start feeling that life isn't what you expected it to be, and in some cases what you demand of it. That causes a depressed state. The longer you stay feeling depressed, if it happens every day, you wake up and you think life's not worth living, it becomes permanent, and on average about every 6 months. Then you need a form of talk therapy or counseling or medication. In the United States, I'll talk about,
Sure.
I was put into a position with 2 hospitals in Massachusetts where I allowed counselors, nurses, and doctors to call me on WhatsApp. Now excuse me for a minute, what's happening there is you have doctors and nurses working 16 hours a day. You don't have any family around these patients who are dying from COVID.
That's right, because they can't. They're not
They
allowed
can't.
to. Yeah.
So what happens is that 16-hour-a-day nurse and doctor, most hospitals, when you're incapacitated and you're on certain types of oxygen, you have a nurse 16 hours a day or a ventilator who is the only person you really see. Everything, whether it's food or medicine, is transferred to her so that she is the person that becomes your family. They are the ones that hold your hands. Some of these people are as young as 25 and as old as there are nurses that have come back in their 60s to help out.
And they're back into service,
yeah. And they're dying at an enormous rate. And all they're asking is social distancing and wear a mask. That's all they're asking of us as human beings. The reason for that is simple. They don't want to see anybody else in a hospital. They don't want to see their patients die. You go into that field because you have an expectation that you can help somebody, and hopefully save someone. And less that's happening, especially with the elderly, but even with young people with COVID. They're finding more and more that there are systems within your body that just don't recover.
Yeah.
That it takes longer and longer no matter how young you are.
And we're reading a lot about that now. The latest one is now they're finding that people who have recovered from COVID now have permanent heart damage.
Right.
And then there's the kids that have like Kawasaki syndrome, and we're learning more and more and more. And you get these nurses that you were talking about When we look at the statistics of the deaths and mortality rate, I think a lot of us kind of gloss over the fact that in those numbers are medical professionals, that knowingly go into these situations. And when you've got people, especially like vets, that end up in the hospital and they're in there for an extended period of time, some of them are in there for months. This nurse, he or she, like you said, becomes their family. And now when they are released, hopefully, from the hospital, not having that person in their life anymore, does that compound the problem? Is that the new loss for them?
Well, that person becomes your savior in many ways. That's the only person you see. That's the person you feel best about seeing every day. You know they're doing everything in their power to help you. You are discharged from the hospital and you go home, and most of the people I talk to, what they do talk about, if they do get COVID and they live through it and they spend a few months in the hospital, and whether it's on oxygen 95% or a ventilator, once you get to 95 or 100%, then you go on a ventilator. Most elderly people with comorbid conditions don't get off that ventilator. I have a sister-in-law that had severe asthma. Her lungs were compromised anyways. All my brother, her husband, could do is call every day and talk to a doctor, or mainly talk to the nurse that was treating her. Ended up dying of COVID. That nurse becomes a lifeline to the family. It's the only person they can talk to. It's the only person that gives them hope. And they were giving my brother hope, even though you see all the statistics that say that a person that has too many comorbid conditions probably won't survive COVID once they get on a ventilator. So there are two problems with that. One of them is young people who believe that this is just the flu and it won't happen to me. And more, especially in places like Florida, young people are getting it and finding they have permanent problems. The other thing is the people that we talked about as off ventilators are finding they have permanent problems, permanent health conditions. But it's the nurses and doctors that call me, and the technicians that are crying and talk about how many people they're losing. One nurse told me that in a week's time, whether you had cancer or a heart condition, diabetes or what, in a week's time, a hospital might see one person die. This hospital, they're seeing one person a day die. Nurses crying, but they're going every day to that hospital for 16 hours, 7 days a week. There are people in their 60s, nurses and doctors, that have retired, or psychologists or clinicians like myself that have retired, are going back in those hospitals with comorbid conditions, but they're trained to help, and they're doing that.
This also, exacerbates the problem with the VA hospitals. Because the VA hospitals, function as any hospital does, but they are underfunded, they're understaffed, and a lot of the vets, the disabled vets that are in there, have a lot of underlying health problems. And you have the ones that we all are familiar with, Agent Orange and the complications to that. But as you get older, you have the complications that many of us do. I get frightened sometimes when I have to go to the grocery store, because I have diabetes, I have COPD, I have Parkinson's. I'm like an amalgamation of comorbidity. So I'm washing everything and taking my clothes off when I get to the front door and all this other stuff. But in the vets hospitals, and I think Willie, you could probably speak to this. How much more of a problem is it when you combine the information we got from Dan about the mental issues that a lot of disabled, a lot of vets have, along with the conditions in the veterans hospitals?
Well, I think a lot of it comes into play as I was listening to Dan, and as we watch and as we learn. There's a lot of people, whether it be the veterans or other people in the hospital, that are lacking the social part of the healing that you can do. Our granddaughter is a nurse in Ohio. She just graduated. She just got a job, and she works in the psychiatric ward. And where she disease, a lot of things that are happening, is the fact that these patients are by themselves. They don't have family. They don't allow the family in.
Right.
So I'm wondering, actually, throughout not only the veteran hospitals but other hospitals, how much that affects the people in other parts of the hospital, the cardiology, the pulmonology, and you can't get. We have a relative who's getting radiation and chemotherapy, and the wife can't go in with him, so she has to sit outside in the car while he's going through that.
And that's tough.
It's got to be tough. I can't understand. I can't imagine what it would be like to go through.
The vets that I know from the States, I know quite a few vets from the States. When I was healthier, I used to ride motorcycles with the Rolling Thunder group.
Okay.
We were a veterans biker group.
Yeah.
And we would make regular visits to the Veterans Hospital, particularly the one in Durham, North Carolina, because we were in the North Carolina chapter. And the two biggest complaints or issues that I get from my friends in North Carolina about the vet hospitals is that a lot of these guys, they're long-term patients.
Yeah.
And they have no visitors.
Right.
Their family has forgotten about them, or maybe has died off. But for whatever reasons, for a very, very long term, the hospital staff is their family.
Yeah, exactly.
And the other complaint that I get, and either one of these we can go into a little bit of detail. They're angry because a lot of them have underlying health problems, and they seem to be concerned that the younger people who may be asymptomatic and feel that they don't need to observe the protocols, wearing the mask and social distancing, and they feel like these people are trying to kill them. Now I know that there's some mental issues with that, but it's a very real thing. They go out and they see a lot of people not observing these protocols, and they're feeling like their lives are being put in danger for it. And the biggest thing is, I've gone, I put a uniform on, I went out and I put myself in harm's way, and now I'm going to die because some 20-year-old thinks they're bulletproof.
Yeah, but a lot of that is maybe Dan can verify this with me. My thinking, we worked in a inner city drug rehab, alcohol rehab place in the city of Cleveland, Joni and I, and we had a lot of the guys from the Veterans Hospital who were addicts dropped off at our place because the Veterans Hospital either didn't want to or couldn't do anything for them. And they came in, and a lot of them were just angry. Once they got past, the methadone treatment, they were angry, and it was difficult a lot of times. And I don't think it's really changed. We may have the 19ers in there, the Corvid people in there now, as opposed to what was in vogue 20 years ago. So it maybe hasn't really changed that much, except for what causes it. And I don't know if any of that's been addressed at all in terms of, like I said, the social. It was good to hear that the Episcopalian Church and the evangelical churches may be starting to get involved in this more often, because that's a huge part of recovery. Also,
in many countries, particularly here in Panama, the religious community plays a vital role in the lives of a majority of the citizens here. And because of that, that relationship that NINSA and the other agencies are trying to establish, or actually have established, with the communities of faith, whether you're a believer or not, there is no argument against the efficacy of someone's personal spiritual beliefs and how it affects their health and how it affects how they see the world.
Now take that step, and the way things seem to be happening, but you're not able to get that from anybody except for yourself, maybe, and the occasional nurse that can take 5 minutes off of her time to come in and talk with them and blah 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 blah. And so you don't have that because of the protocols going on in the hospitals.
And I think one of the things, and I'm not sure about this because there hasn't been official information released, but from what I've heard, is one of the things that they might be exploring is allowing members of the clergy of these various organizations access to the patients, access to the COVID-19 patients. Like I said, this hasn't been released yet. It's just what I'm hearing through my sources. Because of the problem you have, you're not allowed to have your family.
Yeah.
But if you have a belief, if you have a spiritual belief, or if you're a member of a church, to have that a representative of that faith be able to come in and console you, and to hold your hand or pray for you or whatever. And I know that there's a lot of people out there that, oh, this is a church state thing. It's when you're at that point, and you're in the hospital and you're on oxygen and you're on a ventilator, you want all the comfort that you can get. And to many people in this country, many people in the world, that comes through their spiritual beliefs.
When you got a machine breathing for you, you want somebody there next to you that holds your hand.
Yeah, absolutely.
And helps you and talks to you. Whether it be somebody in your family or somebody from the community of faith or somebody from the VVO or whatever. That's a big part. In my opinion, a big part of healing.
Well, and that's a sacrifice too.
Well, yeah.
You know what? If you're a clinician or if you're a member of, if you're with an outreach group, just like the health professionals, you know that when you're going into that setting, you run the risk of becoming infected yourself.
That's right.
So it takes a kind of a selfless person who really has the best interests of these patients at heart to be willing to take that risk. And for a lot of the veterans here, that's more important. I'm not saying that for a non-veteran it's not important, but because of all the issues and because of all of the underlying circumstances that surround being a veteran or a disabled vet, having that interaction has got to be a boost to your mental health. Dan, you could speak to that.
Well, you said some interesting things, and the one that sticks to my mind is they're not allowing clergy into hospitals. Now, there may be changes in the United States, but currently the hospitals I'm dealing with, they're not. However, there is spirituality happening. There are people on oxygen or just or on a ventilator making the sign of the cross, and basically they're requesting of nurses and doctors to pray with them. And there are doctors and nurses after they die. They don't know, like a clergy, last rites, but are actually standing around the bed and praying for that patient with tears in their eyes. There are nurses for 16 hours a day that are refusing to take their breaks, and they stay in those rooms with that one patient and treat them until they're no longer there. And then immediately they're put with another patient. These people will have long-term psychological issues. They will have long-term health issues.
I can't even imagine. I can't even imagine how that would affect the mental health of health professionals.
Well, let me put this out to you. Okay, PTSD is not only for vets.
Right.
It's not only something that vets handle. If you see a murder on the street, you can get the PTSD, for lack of a better word. You can get the PTSD. And you need the counseling to be able, in a lot of ways, to be able to get that. Again, whether it's including the spiritual end or it's not including the spiritual end, you need that to be able to do that. So these poor nurses and these doctors, they're 16 hours and then they get another patient. And who are they talking to be able to?
Well, especially and I bring up the VA hospitals because a lot of the patients there, they're long term.
Right.
They're not in there because they have COVID. They're in there for a variety of reasons. Sometimes it's just the natural aging process, but they're long term in there, and you have, by and large, a good percentage of the medical staff of the VA hospitals are veterans themselves. Not all of them. I mean, it's open to everybody, but there's a good percentage of the healthcare workers that work in the VA hospitals that are veterans and may be having some PTSD issues. And so I know you said that PTSD isn't. It's not. You don't have to be a vet. You don't even have to be a combat vet. You don't really. PTSD, it comes from many different things. But you look at the situation in the VA hospitals. They're underfunded. They're understaffed. Long-term patients with a lot of comorbidity, and then you have other vets or other active duty service people working in the hospitals, and it seems to me that would be a perfect storm, really, for PTSD and other mental health problems. Dan?
Yeah, so veterans and veterans hospitals do have all of the things you say. That's very accurate. But if you're a veteran in the United States and an ambulance takes you to the nearest hospital.
Right.
And those are hospitals for everyone, not just veterans. And it won't transfer you to a veterans hospital. The best equipped hospitals in the United States are equipped private hospitals or hospitals in that state to treat everyone, not veterans. The other thing I'd like to talk about, so PTSD, that was an interesting comment. PTSD for veterans would be an isolated incident that's so horrific that your brain can't figure it out. That's the easiest way to say it. And so periods of time that have the same smell, the same date, time, hour, something can trigger that and give you PTSD. It's a fight or flight response. But the accumulation of all the things that nurses, technicians, and doctors are seeing is an accumulation of PTSD that will stay with them the rest of their life, whether it's in a dream state or whether they just wake up and can't figure out what the dream was, but they're shaking. It's all of the accumulation of all the people that die stays with you. The same thing as a Marine or Army or any veteran that's been in a war. All of the people that died, your friends and compatriots, stay with you. Those faces never change. If that soldier that died was 18, 19, 22 years old, he remains 22 for the rest of your life. That's what your horrible dream is about a 22-year-old dying. Social workers is another issue. Social workers in the United States are extremely afraid of what's happening, especially to their clients that struggled with raising their children and had levels of physical abuse. What's happening to the children that are now in those environments where parents could be compensating by using drugs or alcohol? What's happening to the children in the United States? There are many families we hear about that are homeschooling them and doing a wonderful job, but social workers don't deal with those families. Social workers deal with families that are struggling. Imagine how much they're struggling now, where they have to line up to get food donated to them. I mean, workers who are usually working for themselves and providing their own food right now are lining up with thousands of cars to try to get food.
This is one of the things that I wanted to ask, and I know, Dan, you can speak to this, and probably you too will, from a different perspective. But it's not a secret that the mental health care industry, I hate calling it industry, let's just say the mental health care community, is was already stretched a year ago. 6 months ago. We've all heard and read the stories about various states and up in the United States that have had their mental health budgets slashed to the point where they just had to let people out of mental facilities, just put them on the street. So now, and this also speaks to PTSD and other mental health problems, you've got so many families now that, in addition to the struggles they're having with their day-to-day life, whether it's raising a kid, maybe you got a problem child, whatever. But now you have added to that everything that comes with the fear of dying from this disease. You've got people who are unemployed, and as of this morning, that extra $600 has run out. It'll run out at the end of the day today, and tomorrow, who knows. You have that information that people have to deal with. Like Dan said, people are trying to homeschool their kids. That's not for everybody. We did it for 8 years, and I can tell you that is not for everybody. And then on top of that, you have the issue of, well, I can't pay my bills, I can't pay my rent, I can't put food on my table, I don't have a job. You know, my neighbor is sick. They died of COVID-19, and all of this is such an unbelievably heavy weight for just one family or one person to carry. It seems like that is just going to completely, if it hasn't already, overwhelmed mental health care.
And then add to the fact that you don't know for 100% if the information that you're receiving from the media is true. Does that make sense? You know what I'm...
Well, and that's a whole other show.
That's a whole other
show. I mean, there are ways you can get accurate information, you know, but that doesn't matter because, you know, you get your information from where you get it. And like I said, that's going to be another show down the road. But and it's going to be a good show, guys. I promise. The uncertainty, Dan, suicide. You gave me a figure earlier about how many suicides are happening now. What was it?
Most people, most agencies, including the federal government, which won't come out this year, but believe there's approximately 800,000 to 1 million people that attempt suicide. They might not be successful, and there might be an intervention. But now they're estimating that one person attempts or commits and is successful in dying every 40 seconds in the United States.
And that's just in the United States.
That's just in the United
Every
States.
40 seconds.
And before we end, I'd like to give some numbers for people that want to call and talk about their depression. For veterans here...
And by the way, before you give those numbers out, these after every show, you know, I do a little post-show promo. All of the numbers and information that Dan and Will are going to give you are going to be posted on social media. Go ahead, Dan.
So, if you're from this country and you're Panamanian, obviously the language is Spanish, there's a number 523-6800 for depression, anxiety, suicide, PTSD, thoughts of killing yourself. There's the BVO, Boquete Veteran Outreach, has a crisis line, 6609-3352. The Christian Organizations of the United States have an 1-866-599-2264. The Veterans Organization in the United States has an 800 number, 1-800-273-8255. And if you're a non-veteran, still call that number because they will give you numbers or get you in touch with a crisis hotline. The last one is for LGBT community. There's a 1-866-488-7346. The most interesting thing is with psychologists and psychiatrists and counselors have been for years asking the Federal Communication Commission to have a hotline, universal hotline that anybody can call, like if you need a police or fire, 911. They've just recently approved a 988 number. So I would suggest you call these numbers, but there'll be a 988 number that you can simply dial for depression and suicide or anxiety, and you will be in touch with a local crisis line who will help you.
So basically, if now the 988, obviously, you know, that's not going to work here in Panama.
No.
We all have family in the States. Right. So, you know, if you're listening or when you read the promo, give those numbers to your family, particularly that 988 number, because, you know, we've gotten so used to in many in the UK it's 999, you know, 911, right, to calling a number, you know, to get help. So if you don't have all these numbers handy, or if something happens, you're in a different part of the house and the numbers are stapled to your wall or your refrigerator, you can just dial that 988 of the States. So for those of us here in Boquete who have family in the States that may be suffering with excuse me, some mental illness, whether they're vets or not vets, PTSD, suicidal ideations, this is a really good number to have to get help. And I guess it works like 911. If you're in, you know, New York, you get a local New York. If you're in Boston, you get a local Boston. Right. Okay. Well, you want to say something?
Well, also too, yeah, I know. Also too, this is a time to think also of as we're going through this, not only for the veterans, but for the population itself, there are a lot of single people here, male and female, that have no support, have nobody to talk to. The three of us, we're fortunate to have wonderful women by our side, to be able to walk with us, hold our hands, do whatever we are able to do, sit down and talk with them at the end of the night. My wife and I have a bistro time. We sit there, we have a little table, we'll talk about the day, the week, the month, the year, kind of thing. And that's an important time to be able to get through potential depression as we're sitting here, as we don't know whether we're going to be able to get back to the States if you want to go back. You don't know whether you're going to be able to get back in if you do get back. So those are perfect times for you to be able to sit down and talk with your wife and sit down and say what's going on. But the single men and women, they don't have that, whether they're veterans or just the population. We all know a lot of singles.
And Facebook really doesn't replace that.
No.
You know, as much as we'd like to think, you know, that the digital world, and for all the wonder that it is, it can't replace a personal conversation.
Right. And then even the idea, we'll see how this works out with the quote-unquote religious community, how we can reach out to those kind of people too. You know, we have to be aware of that, you know. So, you know, that's my thing.
Dan, you want to add something to that?
Well, I think religious communities is really important, especially in Panama, where you have so many people that are very religious and go to church. Your priest or rabbi or minister would function in this community and others as you're being able to relieve yourself of your conscience, relieve yourself of your depression and anxiety. With churches closed, that's a very difficult thing. When you are depressed, you have to believe that there is some way someone can help you feel better. That's what religious churches and religious organizations are, and your local priest now, or just praying to God or receiving the sacraments, whatever you believe God is to be, you confess to that person that you're struggling. Now you and everyone prays in their own way, singularly, but you prayed as a group, and even that's not allowed now. That's an extremely difficult thing. Facebook is not an answer, because as we all know, you on Facebook, you choose a side, whether it's political, whether it's religion. I believe in God, I don't believe in God, who you believe in, what you believe in, and you isolate yourself with that same group of people that believe the same way you do. That's not what helping yourself therapeutically is, whether it's a counselor, a clinician, or whether it's just a layman in the community who helps you. You need a difference of opinion. You need somebody to listen to you long enough. It's called talk therapy, because you are the person who talks. And the therapist, whether they're licensed or not, is the person that listens. And when you have finished, that person should be having enough of an expertise to hear what you say, to reframe it in a way that would bring a conclusion that is more holistic, it's more helpful to you and healthy to you.
And that's really, you know, when you get down to brass tacks, how's that for a phrase from the 1950s?
Oh, that's really good. Let me write that one down.
When you get down to brass tacks, correct me if I'm wrong, Dan, but the function of therapy is to reframe your thought process, not necessarily tell you, oh, don't ever think those thoughts again, because that's not going to happen. You know, I've had experiences in my life that they will stick with me, regardless of what happens. You know, I buried a child. You know, stuff you don't forget. But a competent therapist or even a good friend who understands will help you reframe that thought pattern from something that is detrimental to your mental health into mechanisms of coping, correct?
Yes, a good mental health person, the first thing they'll tell you is this is you and I. If I'm not listening, if you don't believe some of the things I pass on to you or think that you said, if you feel that you're not getting what you deserve or believe, please go to 2 or 3 sessions, but then tell me, and I will change to another person in our community that might better fit your needs.
Well, sometimes you need a different person.
Right.
You know, there are such a thing as personality clashes. We all understand that. But yeah, sometimes it's just you don't really mesh with that person, and it's not either your fault or their fault. But sometimes you just need to everyone's got a different way of expressing themselves and of talking. You know, sometimes I can't deal with that type of person. They're trying to help. They're great. They're fantastic. Their motives are pure, but this is something about the way they communicate. Well, then go find somebody else.
Right. Or it's not even communication. It's simply that the therapist has bias. Their own upbringing says that I can't be around this kind of a person. Right. So they have bias, and a lot of times a person will come in for therapy, fill out a form, but not tell anyone what exactly they're seeking in therapy in 2 or 3 sessions. Usually takes 2 sessions. The 3rd session is where you finally open up and tell them what's bothering you. Well, some therapists can't handle that type of thing. Some therapists go into a certain type of therapy that are better able to do that. Mine was a general type of therapy. I was able to talk to almost everyone. The only time I was fired was by a 4-year-old. Actually, the 4-year-old was adopted and was going through some real anger issues, and it's very difficult to understand what a 4-year-old is trying to say. I'm a reality therapist, so I don't want a fraud person that believes that you should go back practically into the womb and figure out what's been bothering you. A reality therapist is the opposite end of the scale. They believe that what's bothering you now is the most important thing that needs help with. Well, with this 4-year-old, it was anger issues. It was playing different games that this young boy wanted me to play. The adopted mother, decided that after 4 sessions that he was still having anger, and I wasn't the type of person that would help. So my only firing was by a 4-year-old, basically, and I think that was pretty interesting and humbling.
Well, yeah. I mean, it always is.
Good story.
And there's, Will, you brought up information, the subject of information earlier, and the information available to us from our state agencies, from the U.S. government, from the Panamanian government, it's in a state of flux, and having correct information when it comes to what your health options are, what your legal options and requirements are, is also something that contributes to stress. And I'm happy to say that next Friday on my show is your wife, Joni Fierstein.
Yeah. Oh, wait till you guys get the load of her.
Yeah, she's wonderful. Gosh, she's a firecracker. But there's been some changes recently in how things are done here when you're an expat and you have health problems or you pass away. And Joni's going to give us the lowdown on that, I'm hoping.
Yeah,
I know she's also going to be talking to us about health and hospice, which I believe works with the BDO. You guys work together on projects?
On some, not totally yet. Yeah, okay. And then this virus has really thrown a kicker into a lot of plans that a lot of groups have had, things like that. So we just got to put them on the burner to a degree.
Well, that's good information to have, though, from Health and Hospice, because, like you mentioned earlier, there's a lot of people here that are single.
Yeah.
They don't, well, what do you do? Well, who do you call? How do you get help? So that's going to be an interesting show next week, and I hope you all tune in for that. Joni is a beautiful person inside and out, and she's got all the information that you could possibly want on those particular topics, and they're really important topics.
Oh yeah, and she'll be able to. And what Joni does really well is to explain things really clearly, and doesn't keep it above everybody else's level, because a lot of that stuff can get tiring, and she's got a way of being able. The book that she wrote about it, which she'll be talking about. I assume.
She gives me a new copy of that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I have that with me as well. All right. Final thoughts. We got a few minutes left here. We know that it's difficult in these times with all the problems that we discussed. We know that our mental health, whether we're veterans or whether we're civilians, is really one of the main things that's going to determine how we get through this.
Yeah.
Especially if we end up getting sick. Dan, one final thought from you, and then we'll get to you. What advice would you give someone who's listening or watches the video later, when I post it later tomorrow, that is that's really struggling with all of this?
Well, if you're a veteran, call us. Talk to someone. Even if you're isolated, you're a single person, you still have a neighbor. You still have someone that you can talk to. Don't give up everything. Isolation and depression makes you think that nothing will make you feel normal again. Do something that makes you feel normal, whether it's every morning get up at 8 o'clock, have a coffee and sit outside. If you enjoy the rain or sunshine, then utilize that. Utilize conversations. To use these veteran or these phone lines, they are well trained, and there are people that will listen to you. They're trained to listen, not talk. The last thing I would say is that they're not there to give you advice. They're there to listen to you so you can then self-help yourself and figure out what you need to be well again.
Great. Will, final thoughts?
Piggyback on what Dan just said. Some of you know and some of you don't know, Joni and I, we were in the Philippines for 17 years. We worked in maximum security of the prison system within Manila, Philippines, where we had 14,000 men whenever we came in available. The worst of the worst, kidnap murders, terrorists, whatever you want to do. We had a man that I was a good friend with, very good guy, Monsignor Oligar. And he and I would talk about stuff, what's going on in the prison, what's going on in the world, and things like that. And in his own little Father Mulcahy type look, he'd look at me and he'd say, Kuya, which is a term in the Filipino language for brother or big brother. He'd go, Kuya, this too will pass.
Yeah.
What we're going through now will pass.
Sure will. Yes, absolutely.
So don't give up, folks.
All right, we got about a minute left, so what I want to do is let you know that next week we're going to have Joni Fierstein representing Health and Hospice and a few other interesting things. The week after that, we're going to be starting a new format on the show. You can keep an eye and an ear out for the video. We're going to do live call-in radio about current event topics that you are all interested in here in Boquete. So we're going to have open phone lines, and you're going to get to call in live, and we're going to talk about it.
And Dan and I call?
Yeah, what could possibly go wrong, right? But we're going to give that a shot. But like I said, there's going to be promos all week on that, so keep a listen to it. I want to congratulate all the the coffee farms and fincas here that have won representing Panama. And I also want to mention one last time that this is Boquete Now, Talk Radio. You're listening to Radio Cherokee 103.3 FM, sponsored by Big Daddy's Grill, Boulder 54, and the Tap Out Sport Zone. Pasen buen día, mi familia, mi amigos and amigas. We'll see you next week.